The year was 2025, and the landscape of American life was shifting under the weight of persistent challenges. A harsh reality had settled over the nation. As inflation soared to record highs, the cost of living escalated at an unprecedented pace, and economic instability left millions feeling helpless. For many, the dream of financial security was slipping farther away, especially for those dependent on Social Security programs like Supplemental Security Income, SSI, and Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI. This was particularly true for the elderly, disabled individuals, and those struggling with conditions that made work a daily impossibility. Every month, they waited for their SSI or SSDI payments to arrive, hoping that the meager funds would stretch enough to cover the rising costs of housing, food, transportation, and healthcare. But the strain was undeniable. People were beginning to fall behind, some choosing between paying rent and filling prescriptions, while others were forced to leave necessary treatments untreated or forgo essentials like groceries. The gap between income and expenses was growing wider, and something needed to change. Yet, as this financial chasm deepened for so many, the political climate remained tense and divided. Congress was locked in partisan gridlock, unable to pass much-needed legislation to aid the millions of Americans struggling to survive. That is, until a breakthrough moment occurred, an announcement that would send shockwaves through the nation and give rise to both a renewed sense of hope and a renewed wave of questions. It came on a crisp winter afternoon, a statement from Washington that was set to shake the foundations of public policy and financial aid programs. Congress had just made an unprecedented decision. A one-time $300 bonus would be distributed to all SSI and SSDI recipients starting the following week. The news felt like a lightning bolt, suddenly lighting up the darkened sky of economic uncertainty. News anchors scrambled to cover the announcement, with families across the nation glued to their screens, eagerly awaiting every new piece of information. Congress has made a monumental decision, the broadcast boomed. A $300 bonus payment is officially on its way to SSI and SSDI recipients. Starting next week, millions of Americans will receive this much-needed relief. For those who had been struggling to make ends meet, the announcement was a moment of unexpected joy. Imagine the relief of not having to decide between rent or groceries, or the crushing weight of overdue medical bills that had been left unresolved for months. This wasn't just an update, it was a turning point for those caught in the suffocating grip of poverty. For many, the immediate reactions were jubilant. Family members called, shared the news with their loved ones, and discussed how they would spend their newfound funds. For some, it was about catching up on overdue bills. For others, it was the opportunity to get medical procedures they'd been delaying, and for a few lucky ones, it was even a chance to finally get their car repaired. The anticipation built, and millions waited with bated breath as the date approached. But there was one problem. Questions were swirling. How would it work? Would the payments be automatically distributed? Who was eligible? Would everyone receive the same amount? The announcement had created a sense of excitement, but it also birthed a storm of curiosity and skepticism. And as anyone who had dealt with government bureaucracy knew, there was bound to be a twist. The days leading up to the distribution of the $1,300 bonus were filled with a mixture of hope and confusion. As the media scrambled to gather more details, rumors and misconceptions began to spread. Some were concerned that the bonus was a one-time handout with strings attached. Perhaps there was a catch, they wondered. Would people have to prove their eligibility in some complex, confusing way? Or worse, could the payment be delayed due to the government's notorious inefficiency? Advocacy groups quickly took to social media and held public forums, trying to explain exactly how the payments would be distributed and to allay fears. The truth was this: the payment would be automatically distributed to all recipients of SSI or SSDI, meaning that individuals wouldn't have to navigate bureaucratic red tape to access the funds. That sounded like good news, right? But there was one significant condition. Recipients needed to ensure that their personal information with the Social Security Administration, SSA, was accurate and up to date. For many, this was the first moment they realized that their details might not be current. Some hadn't updated their mailing address in years, while others hadn't set up direct deposit, leaving them vulnerable to delays in receiving their funds. In the days that followed, advocacy groups sent out reminders for recipients to review their accounts with the SSA. Check your details now to avoid delays, they urged. The government had promised to make the process as smooth as possible, but there were always wrinkles in a system that involved millions of people. But here's where the twist came. Rumors started to emerge about potential scams targeting the most vulnerable of all, the elderly and disabled. Some began to report receiving suspicious calls or emails claiming that they needed to provide their personal information or pay a fee in exchange for their $1,300 bonus. Scammers were taking full advantage of the announcement, attempting to exploit the very people who needed help the most. Then the moment arrived. The first direct deposits began to hit bank accounts, and checks started to show up in mailboxes. At last, for many, the payment was here. People felt an overwhelming sense of relief, even joy. For the elderly couple in Ohio, this was the chance to catch up on overdue utilities. For the single mother in Michigan, it was a rare opportunity to take her children to the doctor. It wasn't just about the money, it was the restoration of dignity, the feeling that the government saw them and recognized their struggles. But just as quickly as the relief arrived, so too did the complications. Some recipients who were expecting direct deposits were left waiting, their bank accounts empty. Others received incorrect amounts, either far less than the promised $1,300 or, in a few unfortunate cases, no payment at all. Calls to the SSA helplines were met with long hold times, and many received automated responses instructing them to check back later or fill out an online form. The relief was supposed to be seamless, but the reality was much messier. For some, it became clear that discrepancies in personal data, like incorrect banking information, outdated addresses, or even errors in SSA's own database, were causing delays in processing. These issues were compounded by the scams, which led many recipients to fear they had been duped into providing their personal details to fraudsters. But the twist didn't stop there. As frustration mounted, an anonymous whistleblower came forward with shocking information. They claimed that a small group of insiders within the SSA had intentionally delayed payments to certain individuals. Those whose cases had been flagged for audits, those with recent address changes, and even those who were receiving state assistance from local governments. The whistleblower alleged that this was a systemic effort, a backdoor maneuver by bureaucrats who had been trying to prevent payments from reaching the wrong hands. It was a bombshell revelation that sent shockwaves through Washington as news outlets reported on the allegations and public outcry grew. Congress quickly promised to investigate the claims. Was this really a conspiracy or just a series of unfortunate bureaucratic errors? Either way, the twist was unsettling, and many recipients were left wondering if their relief would be delayed even further. As the investigation into the allegations unfolded, it became clear that while some errors had been unintentional, others were the result of gross negligence. Congress, shaken by the scandal, took immediate action to ensure that all payments were expedited. For those who had been wrongly delayed or underpaid, the government promised to make things right, guaranteeing that all affected individuals would receive the full $1,300 bonus within the next week. The investigation also sparked a much-needed debate about systemic reform. Advocacy groups had long called for changes to the SSA, and now lawmakers who had been previously reluctant to engage in meaningful reform were forced to confront the issues head-on. Were these programs doing enough to support vulnerable Americans? Were there better ways to distribute benefits, ensuring efficiency and fairness? The public began to demand more, not just in the form of a one-time bonus, but in a complete overhaul of how the government approached social support. But beyond the scandal, one thing had become clear. The $1,300 bonus had opened a door to greater change. It had started a conversation about the future of SSI and SSDI benefits and about what could be done to ensure that no American was left behind. This wasn't just about financial relief. It was about the power of advocacy, the strength of community, and the possibility of a better future. As the final payments were made and the political dust settled, Americans looked toward the future with mixed feelings of cautious optimism and guarded hope. The $1,300 bonus was not a perfect solution. It was, after all, a one-time payment, but it had sparked something far more significant. It had awakened the nation to the ongoing struggles of the most vulnerable populations and had placed a spotlight on the deep flaws within the system.